Hi, I'm Hugh,
I'm Rachel.
and we're Hug and Rackle, and we're going to talk today about the Schengen.
Okay, is it Schengen or Schengen or how do you say that? Does anybody know? Because I've heard a million different ways.
It's one of those.
Put it in the comments if you know, because I'm confused.
Today I'm going to say Schengen, maybe, and I might switch. Who knows? But today we're going to talk about that a little bit. The Schengen zone, or the Schengen area, which is, I guess, the most common way of saying it. So, differences between a 2-week vacation where you're just coming for a very short time to Europe and being a slow traveler in Europe is pretty significant. And it's because it doesn't matter what the rules are about navigation between countries and all that stuff as much. It's all in your favor if you're on a 2-week vacation, because you're going to show up and you're going to travel seamlessly and you're not going to probably think much about it.
The Schengen won't matter to you if you're only here for 2 weeks, because it doesn't apply, actually.
Yeah, the benefits of the Schengen zone that we'll talk about are all good, but the negatives, the difficulties aren't in your favor. So we'll get into the details and talk all about it.
Please like and subscribe.
Yes, we're still new at this, so if you don't mind liking and subscribing.
Yes, please.
So the Schengen area actually started back in 1985.
Oof, I was 15 then.
Yeah, I was going to say that. I had no idea about any of this back then.
80s.
But back when, I was still riding bikes and running track in high school, the 5 countries started in the European Union joined together for a visa-free travel between countries.
Seems like a good idea.
So, they wanted to make it easier for movement, because it's like, hey, we're all here together. We need to bound together and make this a better zone, a better area for people to come and travel, and to make it easier for the citizens to seamlessly travel around. So that has grown now to 29 countries, and there's still more candidates on top of that. So it's grown quite a bit, and most recently Romania and Bulgaria joined just earlier this year. They've been slated for quite a while. And just to explain, the European Union is different than the Schengen zone. So if you're a member of the EU, though, then unless there are special exceptions taken, you are going to be in the process of moving towards Schengen zone membership or being part of that zone. So it doesn't mean that it immediately happens, but as soon as you become a member of the EU, then that's on the table, and usually you're moving towards that. So what on that topic? What's the difference between the EU and the Schengen area?
There's a good question. I don't know.
Yeah. So
tell us, Hugh. What's the difference?
So the European Union is a collection of 27 countries, and it's more centered around political and economic interests.
Wait. So there's 27 in the EU and 29 in the Schengen?
Yes.
How does that work then? Because they're not in the EU. 2 of them are not in the EU, but they're in the Schengen, right?
Well, that's even worse than that.
Okay.
So
the Schengen's very confusing for me.
there are several countries there are some countries that are in the EU, but that are not in the Schengen zone. And there are some countries that are in the Schengen zone that are not in the EU.
Because complication, is the best way to go. Let's
That's
just
right.
confuse everybody.
It can't be easy. By the way, we'll have links in the bottom here to the blog post that we did, and we list out all of the countries, Schengen, EU, and the crossover, so you can see all the details. We're not going to talk about all those in this post. The main difference, though, is the European Union is about policies, and it's about a governing body.
In my opinion, the Schengen is a lot like the United States, because the United States, you can travel anywhere in the United States. You go across borders of states, and it doesn't matter. You're fine. It's no big deal. Schengen is kind of Schengen is kind of the same way for the people that are in the Schengen, and they can just travel throughout however they want without having to worry about the borders. So to me, that's a lot like the United States. So just a correlation there
Yeah, and
for the people that live in the Schengen.
it's actually a good point, though. The land mass of the United States makes it a lot easier to do this because once you get into one of the sides of the United States, then you've got a big long border for Canada and a big long border for Mexico, but everything in between, it's all the United States.
Free reign.
So it's very easy. With the EU, you have Greece, and you have so the whole point is like you have some that are a little bit more disconnected right now, and unless all of the countries that are in the landmass of Europe that are in between all of the EU countries, it makes the borderless travel a little bit more difficult. I mentioned the difference between a 2-week vacation and being a slow traveler. So what's the big difference really between those two?
Well, a 2-week vacation, you know what you're doing. You're going here, and you're enjoying everywhere along the way. And you pretty much have free travel through. You might have to have your passport checked depending on what countries you're going to. But it's pretty easy to go wherever you want to go. For us, we're slow travelers. We have to think about the Schengen zone because so many countries are in the Schengen zone. So you have to have a certain amount of time. You're only allowed a certain amount of time in the zone before you have to get back out of the zone. For us, we have to very carefully track when we're in and when we're out. Because if you're in for too long, you can get into big trouble and possibly be booted out forever. You don't want to be in there too long because you could definitely get in trouble. So for us, we're kind of having to hop in and hop out, and there's only a very small amount of countries that are in the area that are not in the Schengen zone.
Right, and so specifically 90 days out of 180 days is the rule, which means that, and this is important, and this is the part that makes it confusing. The 180 days is rolling. So if it was
it
just
used to be more difficult than
yeah,
it already
exactly.
is.
If it was now, it works in your favor. Actually, it's better that way, but it's also a lot more complicated. So what that means is 180 days is counted from today always, or you know, like if you're looking forward or backwards. That means that if 185 days ago we entered a Schengen country and we were in there for 90 days, that now because it's 185 days later, that 5 of those days have dropped off because it's a rolling 180 days. That's the only, it's very difficult. Like it took me a while to kind of wrap my brain around it. And just to be clear, we still use calculators.
I was going to say, we use specific apps that you can get that keep track of it for you. So you pretty much just put in what days you're where, and it'll tell you if it's too many or if you have a lot of time left, or you know, it rolls like the 180-day rolls. So it keeps track for you. Highly suggest doing something like that. Otherwise, you're going to go crazy trying to figure it out yourself.
Yes, and
Makes it so much easier.
In the blog post, there's links to the calculator. So just check out the blog post and click through to the links. But yes, we live by the calculator.
Yeah.
So I wanted to give a very quick example of the fact that, you know, there's 2 different ways you can follow that 90 and 180 day rule. There's an easy way and then there's a more difficult way. The easy way is nice because there's not as much work to it, and that is that you show up in a Schengen country and you keep traveling through Schengen countries for your whole 90 days in a row.
Yeah.
So you're not splitting up your time.
That's usually what we do. It just makes it easier for us. And yeah.
Yeah, because it's just easier to calculate because you're tracking from the first day of entry to the last day. So you're not having to worry about things like, oh, well, we were in this country and in this country on this day. Well, that whole day still counts the same.
You have to be careful as well. You have to leave a little bit of extra, because if you're flying from one place to another and you land for a layover in a Schengen country, that counts as one of your Schengen days. So you have to, we always leave an extra few days where we're not in the Schengen, just in case we end up having to travel through at some point. So something to be aware of, because it can bite you if you're not careful.
Yes, and this is another
We
thing.
don't do the whole 180 days.
This is
ever.
another thing we've heard about, what we haven't experienced, that if you end up having a canceled flight and you're in a Schengen country, then you end up
Stay
having to
night.
spend an extra night. Well, if you're cutting it too close, then you're really putting yourself in jeopardy of overstaying your 90 days.
Yeah.
So always leave at least 5 or 6 days, I would say. A buffer is the ideal, so that you don't have any of those kind of issues. You don't want to add stress.
Yeah.
So just to give you a quick example, though, of a balance of doing it the other way. So it's more complicated, but there are a lot of the Balkan countries that are outside of the Schengen zone.
A little clump of them all together.
Yeah, they're kind of in a nice little grouping, and it makes it easy so that if you are trying to do a slow travel tour and you're trying to keep your costs low, maybe you don't want to fly and you just want to stay on the ground traveling.
Trains or buses.
I'll just throw out, because I mean, there's a bunch of ways you can do this. One of the examples that I came up with for this talk today is you go from Greece to Albania, to Montenegro, to Croatia,
Inside,
Serbia,
outside,
Bulgaria,
inside,
and to Turkey.
outside.
And then, you will have, in that time, you will have traveled 96 days if you spend 28 days or 4 weeks in each location.
Which we highly suggest, because if you're doing slow travel and you do Airbnbs, if you stay for 28 days, you get a much better
Yes.
discount.
Yes,
Just putting that in there.
that is
That's
important.
why the 28 days. We stay at least 28 days pretty much everywhere we go, unless it's just a quick
And
jump.
35 days is our sweet spot, because
5 days
having
is good.
3 weekends in between travel weekends, 3 weekends is really nice to have. But 28 days is good, especially when you're considering Schengen, because then you end up with 3 countries, 3 locations, but you're still well under your 90 days. So that's kind of the balance.
Yep.
In this case, you end up for 196 days of travel, you have 84 days spent in the Schengen zone for that example I gave. And so you have 6 days to spare. So that's just an example of how you can do this. You just have to look at the map, kind of lay out what path makes sense.
There are maps out there that'll highlight what the Schengen zone is too. So European map with the Schengen area highlighted, and then you have the little places that aren't in it. It's very helpful. I use that all the time.
Planning and knowing what the right choices are definitely makes it a lot easier to enjoy your travel, because you don't want to be stressing about this stuff
If
when
you're
you're
slow
actually
traveling.
Yeah, exactly. You want to actually enjoy your time. That's probably the most important thing, is get all of this detail work out of the way ahead of time. Then you can go with comfort and confidence. The last thing we'll leave you with is just something that, when you're planning, do your own due diligence on the timely basis of your travel.
Schengen changes all the time.
Yes. So one example of that is last year when we went to Bulgaria, it was outside of the Schengen zone. And we had traveled in Italy for a good long time in 2 different places.
Yep.
So if it had been in the Schengen zone, we would have overstayed our Schengen
By a
time
lot.
in Bulgaria. That starting in, just a few months ago, a couple of months ago this year in 2024, now Bulgaria and Romania are in the Schengen zone. So, and I'll give you one hint, Montenegro is probably going to be next, but there's a list,
They're working on it.
and there's no guarantees of which one will actually come in what order, but
And most of the little countries, like the Balkan countries that we stay in a lot, that are not in the Schengen right now, most of them want to be in the Schengen zone. So, eventually, a lot of them could also be there, which makes it a little more difficult for us. So we have to figure out what the heck we're going to do then. But
Yeah.
for now, we have a little clump of countries that we can hide out in for a while before we can head back into the Schengen. And usually, they're less expensive. The countries that
Yes.
are not in the Schengen, the little Balkan states, are less expensive, which is why we're kind of staying here for a while. Save some money, and still enjoy beautiful views and all kinds of cool stuff. Still in Europe.
Yep, that's true.
We love us some Europe.
You're actually brought up a good last point, though, that because these countries eventually are probably slowly but surely going to be in the EU, and or if they're in the EU already, they're going to be in the Schengen zone. Turkey, Morocco, there's a few places that are still around that are touching or right near the zone. So, short ferry ride to Morocco from Portugal, Spain area, and Istanbul shares, European is partly in Europe and partly in Asia. So those are both good kind of long-term options
I think
for.
they both allow 90 days.
Yeah, and the different. I don't know about Morocco, but we need an e-visa for Turkey, right?
Right. When we got to Turkey, we had to get a visa at the airport. It was like $40 a piece or something like that, and they just do it right there. At least for us, they did.
It's because unlike you find people out there that plan way ahead, we did not verify, we actually need an e-visa ahead of time. So we showed up to the airport, we're on our way in, and we didn't have our visa. So
It wasn't a big deal though, so thankfully for that one, we checked better now.
that was fairly early on in our travels,
Yes.
and we still hadn't figured out all this stuff.
Yeah.
So anyway, hope you've enjoyed this. Hope you learned a little bit. Hope you have a good one. We'll see you next time.
Bye-bye. Like and subscribe.